Hello, friends. Another doozy on tap, hot off the presses. I just printed it out. I apologize for any of you who were waiting on pins and needles to start at 11 because it took me a little while to crank it out, so we had to start 32 minutes later. But it's a good one, and if you don't want to hear anything about Charlie Kirk, I'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be a good one as well on Faith and Doubt, our monthly show. Now, if you don't know who Charlie Kirk is, or you haven't heard anything I've said about the murder and trial, go back to the last two episodes of Eyes to See, 22 and 21. Now, I haven't had a Coke in 2 days. Been slimming down. But after cranking this one out for the last 4 hours, my brain needed a little jet fuel, so pardon me. Okay, now that you've gone back and watched the last two episodes and you understand where we're headed and where we've been with the Charlie Kirk situation, then we can get started as soon as you like and subscribe. No, seriously, I need like 4 subscribers to get to 888 again. All right, so no more BS. Let's get into it. This one's a doozy. I mean, if you think about it. All right. The title, Who Gets to Speak Now for Charlie Kirk? I remember watching the video of Charlie Kirk being shot and immediately feeling that something wasn't right. I explained it away as the trauma of the event and the idea that Charlie was gone. But it never sat well with me. The number one thing for me was that the sound wasn't right. Now, I've been around firearms my entire life. I shoot competitively. I've taken the lives of dozens of game animals and even once my own dog with rifles and pistols. Again, the sound didn't sit well with me. I explained it away as being on video and remembered that, like the Butler, Pennsylvania assassination, the world of investigators would figure it out. I also watched the movement of his body, saw the strange wound, and thought the pieces didn't look or sound the way I would have expected them to. Now, that instinct does not make me a ballistic expert, and it certainly doesn't solve the murder. Video compression distorts sound. Camera angles deceive. Gunshot wounds do not always behave the way people imagine. But an instinctive red flag is not meaningless, merely because it arrives before an explanation. That is often where an investigation begins. My first question was simply, who did this? Wow, I just had an overwhelming thing in my head just come and I don't know if I want to mention it. Yeah, okay. That's profound, but I can't talk about it. My first question was simply, who did this? The state immediately said Tyler Robinson did it. Prosecutors presented surveillance footage, DNA evidence, digital communications, a recovered rifle, testimony concerning Robinson's movements, and statements from his roommate and romantic partner, Lance Twiggs. The evidence has been described as overwhelming by politicians, influencers, commentators, and people I generally respected. Prosecutors allege that Robinson admitted responsibility repeatedly in written messages, while the defense disputes how much of the state's account has actually been established and challenges parts of the forensic and motive evidence. Final arguments whether Robinson should be sent to trial are scheduled for September 1. Perhaps Tyler Robinson killed Charlie Kirk. Perhaps the state will eventually authenticate every message, connect him conclusively to the roof, established that the recovered rifle fired the fatal shot, and explain Lance Twiggs' role without leaving reasonable doubt. If it can do that, then convict him. The trouble is that the preliminary hearing did not settle any of those questions for me. Instead, it produced a split. One side watched the hearing, and after each day, mind you, declared the matter finished. The evidence was overwhelming. Tyler obviously did it. The prosecution wiped the floor with the defense. Anyone who continued asking questions was either stupid, dishonest, cruel to Charlie's widow, or drifting into lunatic conspiracy theories. The other side watched the same hearing and saw too many connections that still depended on being narrated into place. And on this show, we're trying to find vision beyond the narrative. Oh, that doesn't work. See that little sign right there? It means something. A distant figure with few identifying features on a rooftop was claimed to be Tyler by investigators, but the public has seen nothing close to identifying Tyler. The public also did not receive a close, unmistakable image of Tyler handling the firearm and firing the firearm. A rifle was discovered suspiciously well after trained dogs had searched the area and found nothing. DNA evidence may strongly connect Tyler to that rifle, but physical contact with an object is not automatically proof that a person used it in a particular moment. Tyler and Twiggs shared a home, and Twiggs' own DNA reportedly appeared on items connected to the weapon, along with multiple other. And Tyler's was actually the most degraded. The fatal bullet fragment was not conclusively matched to the recovered rifle. The messages may eventually become devastating evidence, but screens displaying words still require authentication, attribution. Sorry, I knew that word at one point. Attribution, device records, timestamps, and context. Twiggs helps interpret several parts of the story, while also standing inside much of the evidence himself. The dissident side is not demanding a more exciting story. It is demanding that the existing story makes sense. That is the split. One side wants closure because it believes the answer has already been supplied. The other side wants rational coherence because many parts of the answer remain unresolved. One side looks at the entire pile and calls it overwhelming. The other takes out each piece and finds a hole in every one. The distinction between the two sides is not trivial. A complete presentation is not the same thing as a complete explanation. A prosecutor can arrange facts in a persuasive story while some of the connections remain open to challenge. That is not an accusation of dishonesty. That's what prosecutors do. They interpret evidence in the direction of guilt. Defense attorneys interpret it in the direction of reasonable doubt. The courtroom exists because neither interpretation becomes truth merely by being stated confidently. The strange feature of this case is that nearly every category appears to contain enough evidence to point toward Tyler, but not nearly enough to close the category independently. The footage points towards him, provided the identification is correct. The rifle points towards him, provided it was the actual weapon fired. The DNA points toward him, provided contact means possession during the shooting. The messages point toward him, provided he wrote them and the records are complete. Twiggs points toward him, provided Twiggs is truthful, uninvolved, and accurately interpreting what occurred. The pieces may eventually fit, but for now, the fit still relies heavily on the state's account of what each piece means. That pattern could be the ordinary result of an imperfect investigation into a difficult murder. Real crimes are messy. Cameras miss decisive moment. Evidence is damaged. Body cameras conveniently shut off just before a key moment. Witnesses remember poorly. Forensic testing has limits. Not every unanswered question conceals a mastermind conspiracy. But the holes do seem awfully convenient. They are wide enough to create suspicion, but narrow enough for the official story to bridge the gap with an assumption. There is enough video to establish a rooftop figure, but not a clean public image of Tyler firing. There is enough physical evidence to present a rifle, but not a conclusive bullet match. There are enough messages to create a confession narrative, but questions remain about devices, accounts, context, and authentication. There is enough witness testimony to connect some of the pieces, but the central witness received use immunity and had access to Tyler's home, property, and private life. A sophisticated operation, if one occurred, would not need to erase every camera or remove every piece of evidence. Total absence would itself be suspicious. It would need visible pieces pointing in a desired direction, a suspect the public could understand, wrap their mind around, and enough uncertainty around the decisive connections that institutional authority could finish the story. That resemblance does not prove the evidence was manufactured. It explains why independent verification matters so much. Some people have proposed that Charlie was not killed by the conventional rooftop shot shown in the official account, but by some mechanism associated with a microphone or equipment near his body. I obviously can't say at this time whether that is definitively true. My own first reaction to the sound, the visible movement, and the wound is part of what made me question the account, but unfortunately, instinct is not evidence. Any such theory would require physical proof. Damage to the equipment, residue, fragments, a wound path inconsistent with the claimed firing position, or other findings that cannot be explained by the state's version. Until that evidence appears, the microphone theory is a possibility, but not an answer. But a possibility nonetheless. That same rule must govern every alternative. A second shooter, a decoy on the roof, compromised patsies, manipulated communications, foreign intelligence involvement, or an internal betrayal may explain some of the anomalies. But each theory also creates new questions. Who had access? Who communicated with whom? How was money moved? Who altered evidence? What records exist? What did participants receive or avoid afterward? A theory becomes stronger when it predicts evidence that is later found. It becomes weaker when every absence of proof is explained as evidence of how perfectly the conspirators concealed themselves. However, none of that removes the need to examine motive. Charlie Kirk did not begin as an enemy of Israel. He came from an evangelical Christian world that overwhelmingly considered support for Israel part of its religious and political identity and inheritance. I understand that world because I, too, came from it. Christianity emerged from Israel. Jesus was Jewish. The apostles were Jewish. The Old Testament belongs to the Christian Bible. And Christianity understands itself as a fulfillment of Judaism, of the promises first given through Israel. Many evangelicals therefore see the modern state of Israel through biblical history and have been taught that standing with Israel means standing with God. The Bible, however, should make Christians more careful than that. Israel's election never meant that every king was righteous, every military action was justified, or every ruler spoke for God. Israel's history is filled with promise and rebellion, prophecy and corruption, repentance and bloodshed. Nathan confronted David. Elijah confronted Ahab. Jeremiah denounced Jerusalem's rulers. The prophets did not prove their love for Israel by flattering their governments. They often proved it by refusing to do so. Christian concern for Israel cannot require blind obedience to Benjamin Netanyahu, the Mossad, AIPAC, American donors, or any modern political institution. The modern Israeli state is not God. Its leaders are human beings with national interests, political ambitions, security concerns, and the same capacity for corruption found in every government on earth. Charlie appears to have begun wrestling with that distinction before he died. He remained publicly attached to Israel and wrote Netanyahu in May 2025. June, July, August, September. Expressing his deep love for the country, but while also warning that Israel was losing younger Americans and facing what he called a five-alarm PR crisis. That letter does not read like the work of a man who had become an enemy of Israel. It reads like a committed ally who believed Israel's conduct and messaging were becoming increasingly difficult to defend. His private frustration appears to have gone further. Messages released after his death and reported as authentic included Charlie complaining about pressure from major pro-Israel donors and saying they were leaving him no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause. Reports placed those messages only days before his murder. That is no small change. Charlie was not an old anti-war leftist, an Islamic activist, or a lifelong opponent of Israel. He was one of the most influential evangelical defenders of Israel in American politics. He had access to Trump's world, credibility among young conservatives, a major national organization, and the ability to explain complicated issues plainly. An ordinary critic can easily be ignored. Charlie had the sway to move the people Israel most needed to keep on their side. His change did not happen in isolation. The conservative movement had already been fighting over Israel. Jewish influence, Christian allegiance, donor power, and the limits of permitted speech. Kanye West blundered into that territory first and handled it with the subtlety of a man driving a bulldozer through a church. He made sweeping accusations about the Jews, mixed real questions about concentrated power with ethnic blame, praised Hitler and destroyed his credibility. A reckless man can notice a real pattern and still describe it so badly that the pattern disappears beneath his madness. Kanye gave powerful institutions the easiest defense imaginable. Anyone asking about lobbying, media ownership, donor influence, or political pressure could now be conveniently placed beside the craziest thing Kanye said and then dismissed. Candace Owens encountered the conflict inside conservative media. Her break with Ben Shapiro at the Daily Wire followed months of fighting over Gaza, Israel, anti-Zionism, and the American support for foreign wars. The phrase, "Christ is King," became part of the conflict. For Christians, it is a basic declaration that Christ outranks every government, ethnicity, donor, political alliance, and national interest. But the phrase was increasingly treated as sinister depending on who said it and why. Candace's departure from the Daily Wire in March 2024 showed that challenging the established pro-Israel position carried a heavy institutional price. Charlie represented the next stage. Kanye was dismissed as unstable. Candace was removed from the Daily Wire. Charlie possessed his own organization and stood much closer to the center of Republican power. If he was resisting donor pressure from inside TPUSA, opposing American involvement in war with Iran, and reconsidering the political obligations attached to the pro-Israel coalition, then the conflict had moved beyond internet rhetoric. It had reached an institution with money, access, young voters, and Trump's ear. Oh, I didn't even think of Trump's ear. Bleeding. Iran is the larger background. Before the 1979 Iranian Revolution, I remember it. I was born in 76. I was keen on the news then. Iran and Israel maintained quiet, this is before the revolution, they maintained quiet but substantial strategic cooperation. The revolution, however, overthrew the Shah, severed formal relationships, embraced militant opposition to Israel, and transformed the two countries into regional enemies. Iran later supported Hezbollah and other armed groups hostile to Israel, while Israel increasingly treated Iran's nuclear program, missiles, and regional influence as an existential threat. Israel's desire to weaken Iran is understandable. A hostile Iranian regime has openly threatened Israel, attacked it with rockets, funded its enemies, and built military capabilities that Israelis reasonably fear. Trump's concerns are understandable as well. Iran has been accused by the United States of directing plots against him. Assassination plots. Whatever happened in Butler? A president may conclude that eliminating an enemy capable of attacking Americans and threatening his family would protect the country and secure his legacy. Understanding a motive is not the same thing as approving every means used to pursue it. For decades, factions in Washington and Jerusalem pushed versions of confrontation or regime change in Iran. Different American administrations resisted, slow-rolled, negotiated, sanctioned, threatened, or conducted limited operations without committing the U.S. to a full-on war. Charlie warned publicly against regime change in 2025. He argued that overthrowing Iran's government could create a civil war, enormous casualties, refugees, and another American disaster in the Middle East. Charlie was then murdered September 10th, 2025. On February 28, 2026, less than 6 months later, the United States and Israel began the major war with Iran that Charlie had warned against. That war remains active, costly, and not at all that popular as of July 2026. Almost August. Now, that sequence does not exactly prove Israel killed Charlie, but the sequence does raise enough suspicion to continue asking questions. A powerful evangelical supporter of Israel begins resisting donor pressure. He warns against American war with Iran. He reportedly says he may leave the pro-Israel cause. Within days, he is murdered. The criminal case closes publicly around a young man and Tyler Robinson, whose alleged motive has no connection to Israel or Iran. And literally within minutes of the assassination, in an awfully cringe and suspicious speech, Benjamin Netanyahu moves quickly to seemingly over-memorialize Charlie as a loyal friend and supporter of Israel. A few short months later, America began the war he opposed. Any one of those facts may have an innocent explanation, but together they demand thorough examination. Netanyahu was by far the earliest major world leader to respond publicly after the shooting, and was dead set on emphasizing Charlie's support for Israel and Judeo-Christian civilization. A rapid statement, however, is not evidence of foreknowledge. World leaders respond quickly to major political violence, especially when the victim is an ally. But powerful actors need more than physical alibis when suspicion begins to form. They also need narrative positions. Friend, mourner, ally, defender. Netanyahu stepped into that position immediately and later issued an unusual public denial that Israel had anything to do with the murder. Again, none of that proves guilt, but it does belong in the timeline. The fight over Israel is also where the split over Charlie's death becomes most revealing. The establishment side preserves the familiar Charlie, evangelical, conservative, loyal supporter of Israel, friend of Netanyahu, and a simple victim of a deranged left-wing assassin. That Charlie fits comfortably inside the existing political coalition. The dissident questioning side sees another Charlie emerging near the end. Still Christian, still conservative, perhaps still emotionally attached to Israel, but increasingly unwilling to let donors, lobbying organizations, or a foreign government dictate American policy. That Charlie was far less convenient. He raised questions about money, sovereignty, Christian allegiance, censorship, war, and whether America first means anything when the interest of a foreign state collide with the interest of actual Americans. So who gets to speak for him now? Erica Kirk knew him as his wife and carries a grief no commentator can understand from the outside. Her suffering deserves decency. It does not grant her ownership of any evidence, though. Turning Point USA carries the organization Charlie built. Its leaders know the internal history, donor relationships, staff conflicts, private communications, and pressures surrounding him. That access makes their testimony important. Their institutional interest in stability and survival also makes scrutiny necessary. Candace Owens claims private knowledge of Charlie's concerns and has forced questions in a public view that others appeared unwilling to discuss. Knowing Charlie gives her access, but does not make every conclusion she reaches true. Baron Coleman brings another form of authority. He's a lawyer with a criminal defense experience and a former broadcaster. He knows how evidence should be tested, how witnesses and prosecutors can construct cases, and how public narratives are built. His work deserves more attention than the average internet detective's speculation. He is still analyzing an incomplete public record outside the safeguards of discovery, cross-examination, and a trial. The prosecution claims legal authority and access to the evidence. It may ultimately prove Tyler's guilt. However, a charging document, preliminary hearing, or courtroom presentation does not give the state ownership of Charlie's meaning. Netanyahu and pro-Israel conservatives point towards Charlie's long public record of support. They are not inventing that record. Candace and the dissidents point toward his final private frustration, however, and growing resistance. Each side possesses part of Charlie, but none of them possess the whole man. That's what makes his silence so politically valuable. Charlie could no longer explain whether his anger at donors was temporary or final. He can't tell us whether he remained committed to Israel while rejecting Netanyahu's policies. He cannot describe what he knew, what frightened him, or whom he trusted. He cannot tell Candace she has gone too far, Turning Point that it is hidden too much, Netanyahu that it has misrepresented him, or the prosecution that it has the wrong guy. Everyone can now make Charlie say what their side needs said. The deeper fight is not only over who murdered him, it's over who inherits his influence. Whoever defines Charlie's final beliefs gains authority over what the American right should become next. Was he a martyr for the old conservative coalition, or was he becoming a dissident against it? Did loyalty to Charlie require unity around his family and organization, or does it require exposing the real pressures he was under? Does honoring him mean blindly accepting the accused killer presented by the state, or demanding instead that every unresolved connection be tested? I do not know who killed Charlie Kirk. I suspect the official account is far from complete. I suspect the possibility of a coordinated assassination deserves serious investigation. I suspect Charlie's conflict with pro-Israel donors his opposition to war with Iran and the political value of his removal may be connected to his death. Israel had real motive to neutralize resistance to war with Iran. Possesses sophisticated intelligence capabilities and benefited politically from the removal of one of the few people capable of turning young evangelical conservatives against that war. Bear with me, I'm going to do that again because I think that's a good short. And shorts are everything nowadays. I do not know who killed Charlie Kirk. I suspect the official account is far from complete. I suspect the possibility of a coordinated assassination deserves serious investigation. I suspect Charlie's conflict with pro-Israel donors, his opposition to war with Iran, and the political value of his removal may be connected to his death. Israel had real motive to neutralize resistance to war with Iran. Israel possesses sophisticated intelligence capabilities, and they benefited politically from the removal of one of the few people capable of turning young evangelical conservatives against the war. Suspicion is not proof, but it is also not nothing. The state is asking us to believe Tyler Robinson acted from a professional and political hatred that culminated in a difficult rooftop assassination. Perhaps he did. The alternative possibility is that Tyler and Twiggs were compromised, manipulated, recruited, framed, and or used inside a larger operation. That possibility sounds far-fetched until one examines how much access, money, political power, intelligence capability, and institutional pressure may have surrounded Charlie in his final months. Hundreds of millions of dollars were at stake and certainly can alter loyalties. Political access can rescue careers. Fear can silence staff. An organization preparing to survive its founder may develop interests that no longer match his own. None of those observations accuses a particular TPUSA employee, donor, security officer, or friend of murder. They identify the people and pressures a real investigation should examine. The years following Charlie's death may reveal more than the preliminary hearing did. Watch who receives money, authority, legal protection, access, or advancement. Watch which stories change. Watch which records remain sealed or disappeared. Watch whether witnesses are rewarded, isolated, or protected. Ordinary promotions and financial success prove nothing by themselves. Unexplained benefits tied to interested parties would be another matter. The dissident position does not require certainty about Israel, a second shooter, a microphone device, or a network of compromised insiders. It requires refusing to eliminate possibilities before actual evidence eliminates them. The official side says the evidence is overwhelming and no further explanation is needed. The dissident side says too many things still do not make sense, and we intend to keep looking until they do. Charlie Kirk built his public life around confrontation. Can we go from 10 to 9? Start over. Charlie Kirk built his public life around confrontation. He invited questions, challenged approved language, and argued in rooms where people hated him. Using his death to forbid questions is an absolute betrayal of the didactic method that made him so important. The existing story may ultimately survive further investigation. Tyler Robinson may be the man on the roof. The messages may be authentic. The rifle may be the murder weapon. Twiggs may be an honest witness. Israel may have had no involvement whatsoever. A complete trial may answer every objection. But the story has not earned that confidence yet. Charlie's changing relationship with Israel matters. The pressure from donors matter. His opposition to war with Iran matters. The timing of his death matters. Netanyahu's immediate public involvement matters. The inconclusive forensic questions matter. Lance Twiggs' access and immunity matter. The war that followed matters. They do not amount to proof because someone places them together in a paragraph. They amount to a demand that the investigation remain open. Charlie's widow does not own the investigation. Turning Point does not own it. Candace Owens doesn't own it. Baron Coleman doesn't own it. Netanyahu doesn't own it. The prosecution doesn't own it. Neither does the online crowd that may have already decided who pulled the trigger. The truth is what actually happened. The truth will stand on its own. The truth will survive questioning. The truth does not need a narrative. The truth is that which is. Until every important piece can stand without borrowed certainty, the people calling the evidence overwhelming should stop demanding that everyone else close their eyes. Charlie Kirk does not need another faction speaking through his silence. He needs someone to find out who killed him. The end. You're welcome. Honestly, dude, when I crank out papers like that, it hurts my brain, and I literally get exhausted. So I may be binge drinking Cokes tonight. I've already started the one for On Faith and Doubt tomorrow, and it's a doozy. They're all doozies. That is a tasty beverage. What do you think? No viewers, no comments. YouTube. Fuck you. But we're going to continue pushing this shit. So if you're watching it, you like it, share it to somebody who might like it. Tell them, watch this crazy fool. He's got ideas. He has a lot of words. He puts them on paper. We can talk about it too if you leave some comments, see? But honestly, it's 12:11 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. So most of you are probably asleep. So if you're watching this tomorrow or the next day, do me a favor. Like the video. Subscribe to the channel. I just realized it doesn't really matter though. I'm just anal about that number, 888. I need to own the 8s for more than one reason. And now I'm at 8878, I think. So seriously, 10 more subscribers. It's not too much to ask. It's free, you know. You just hit that little button. I don't even care if you hit the bell. Just know that I'm here every night. Speaking of being here every night, I will be here tomorrow night. Like I said, with On Faith and Doubt. But what's crazy is I thought today was Wednesday. All day long, I was like, oh, today's Wednesday. And I had plans, and I was like, oh, it's fine. It's Wednesday. I can push them back a day. Well, you know what they say, the best laid plans of mice and men. We failed to realize it was Thursday. I literally looked at my watch and it said Thursday, and I was like, wait, it's not past midnight. So right now it says Friday. That's a frustrating place to be. So I got a lot to do, but we are going to have that paper worth your time. I promise. If not, tell me in the comments or write your own damn paper. I don't care. And also, feel free to use mine. I did get some advice today that I should write a book. I might do that. Not about Charlie. Probably the on faith and doubt stuff, though. Put all those together. I think we're on episode 7, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, because it's July. January, February, March, April, May, June, July. I'll give you a teaser on the... The God who allows suffering. Or why doesn't God stop it? A couple of ideas for titles. Yeah, that one's going to be good. So we can step outside the political realm for a minute. All the spin and propaganda and bullshit that comes out of every single person's mouth. And the thumbnails are getting insane. Like, I know I should put specific thumbnails for each episode, but I ain't got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. But these guys, they do 4 videos a day, and each one of them is the most sensationalistic, hyperbolic, clickbaity title and thumbnail. I can't fucking stand it anymore, honestly. So support me. I'm going to be the guy that gets out on YouTube that doesn't do that shit. That instead just says, I mean, look at Joe Rogan. He literally just puts up a picture of his guest and puts his name. No topics of discussion, no nothing. That's all you see and how long it is. I'm not saying that's the best way either. But err on the side of less hyperbolic, less sensationalized, less catastrophizing, less clickbait. I'll work on it. With your help, I'll work on it. If we get 5 likes on this video, I will work on it. All right, folks, I got to get to work. Good night. Or good day. Eyes closed by the sun.